Welcome back to Final Residence TV and episode number 57 of Van Halen Stories. Today I have an amazing guest for you, all the way from New York. Is that right?
Close enough. Yeah, New
Close.
York City, New York City, New Jersey area.
All right. Paul Riario is here
Yeah.
today. Gear editor, tech editor, and online personality for Guitar World magazine, my favorite
That's right.
magazine of all time.
Um,
I've been reading it since I was a little boy. And so that's amazing. How long have you been at Guitar World, Paul?
um, it's coming close to 30 years now.
Jesus, dude, you don't, people probably,
Yeah.
people say that, don't they? They say you don't look. There's no way, right?
Well, I've made my unwillingness to age has been an asset. So
Right. Well, it's greght. It's great. But sometimes people say that about me. It's weird when they say it, but I'm like, okay, I'll take it. Whatever. You think
well, thank you.
they think I'm married to my singer, and she's only 30. I'm like, are you guys crazy? But
That's not a bad rumor to spread around.
right. So anyway, you have this. You also have a tribute. Would you consider it a tribute show, or what would you consider that? Super 70s
So
rock show?
yeah, so the band I play in is called the 70s Super Rock Show.
Okay.
Boy, I hope I said that right. We started off as Super Trans Am,
Okay.
and our management said, you know what, like it's a cool name, and that's what actually which got me in, which led me to go into the band was because I love the name so much. But most kids or anyone under 50 who don't know what a Trans Am is. So we kind of made it the Super 70s Rock Show to basically so people when they see it on a marquee they say they know what they're getting. And the cool thing about being in the band too is that I think we were talking about this a little before, was the fact that I never liked to commit to one particular artist because it would ruin the artist for me. I've been asked to play in Eagles tribute bands, in Zeppelin bands, things like that, and I've turned them all down just because I would just ruin the artist for me. And I love the artists too much to, like, when I hear the song, I like, oh, I don't want to turn it off, But at least with us, we get to span the decade. So I can do anything within that period. So we do anything that's 70s. We even bump into a little bit of the 80s, and it's great. We're a lean machine. There's only 5 of us, and we
Hmm.
cover, vocally and instrumentally just about some very difficult songs. And we don't we use very we don't a lot of bands use a lot of tracks, but we use very little.
Hmm.
We usually use only a track to cover the parts, like say something like a certain synthesizer sound that my keyboardist can't call up. So it's just things like that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah, that's what people really dig it. And look, at my age, I'm happy I'm still out there doing it. I'm out in the
Right.
trenches.
Right.
And it
Right.
also gives me a vehicle to actually test out a lot of the gear that I usually review. So that's a cool thing as
Right.
well.
That is cool. Yeah, that's something that as I've got into this new thing I'm doing with the Pat Benatar Heart tribute, that
Mhm.
I've had to really, work that fractal of mine to work out all the harmonies, because it's one of those situations where I don't have the second lead guitar player, and I need
Yeah.
the harmonies here and there for those songs. And so yeah, I've been working my gear trying to do that. I've got this sitting on my desk right now, trying to, the Tone X, which I'm still,
Ah,
got the Van Halen thing for that. I've got to get that out on the stage and get that going.
so so wait, you switch between both the fractal and that?
I haven't used it yet live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I got it.
but I do a Van Halen tribute, like, a few times a year. And
Yeah.
they have those new plugins for that, that Jim Gosted did, one of my guests did the sounds
Yeah.
for. And
It sounds
it's
great.
really, really amazing, right? And so I'm going to use that. But I also got into this little guy, the Pod Express.
Oh, the Pod Express. Yeah,
Have you
yeah.
have
Okay.
you tried it? Pretty.
No, I have not yet. I actually haven't. The amount of gear that I receive, it's like I try to sift as much through it, but sometimes sometimes I forget I have certain items
Right, sure, sure.
until they
Yeah.
remind me. But
It's amazing
yeah.
what you can get, and for, like, since you go back with this as long as I do, it's like the gear we had when we started compared to the gear that's available now is just like
Oh,
incredible.
without a doubt, I say to everybody, there is There is no better time than now to start playing guitar. You can be whatever you want to be, and you can get whatever you want. It's all out there. I mean, like as you just said before, when I was young, it's like I had to like scrounge to get certain amplifiers. There wasn't a lot, and you just kind of you got what you got, right? It was
Hmm.
just like you want to like a really like a top of the line Les Paul. That's great, but back when we were playing, Les Pauls weren't really around. They were not available
Yeah.
necessarily, but you could buy them on the used market. But like you had to kind of search, and until they brought them back in the late '90s, I believe. I mean, there were
Hmm.
some around, but it's just like the ones that we like a 59, for example. You had to wait until they'd start doing certain tribute years and things like that. But yeah, like now, if you want to be a metal player, we got a million metal guitarists to choose from. Headless guitar. I mean, it's insane. It's just
Hmm.
funny when I talk to certain people, like, they're like, "Oh, I got this great plexi sound." And I go, "Oh, really? Tell me about this plexi sound." And then they play it. I go, "That doesn't sound like a plexi." And
Right. Right.
it's a model thing. I was just like, I played through a lot of plexis, and none of plexis sound like that. It's
Right,
just
right. It's
because
the idealized Van Halenized version of it, or maybe something much more gainy than you would normally have run into back in the
I
day.
can't tell you how much money I spent on buying so many different Marshall heads throughout my career. Like, it's like, oh, this is it. And then I'd plug in, I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. I got to get rid of it. Marshalls are probably or have always been, like some were like, you can read about it all in Guitar World. Obviously, like certain guys had great Marshalls, other guys had terrible Marshalls, and you just kept on finding one until there's one magic Marshall. Apparently Warren DeMartini has a really amazing plexi or a Marshall, like
Hmm.
some super lead, and others chase that other sound. But for the most part, you had to really find a good Marshall to make it work for you.
I remember when you just mentioned Warren, and I think of George Lynch and him as sort of like the last two guys that are out there. I mean, Warren more recently, but George has been out there the whole time. But Warren and George had one thing in common about an amp they used in the '80s, and that was the Super Champ that Paul Revere had done,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Right.
it's all rumored that it was used on Round and Round and some of the Rat songs. But it's about maybe it was just the leads or the rhythms or the other way. But it's that was a weird point because when I first started playing, I was right in '83, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember distinctly plugging into a Super Champ. Was the first amp I ever played through with a used Black Beauty.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the sound. Back then, you didn't have modified. The one behind you, the Rhodes Marshall. That's probably about as distorted as it was.
Mm-hmm.
Right at the dawn of the 800. The early '80s.
You mean the one here? This one,
Yeah,
that's my Rhodes Marshall.
yeah.
It's like a JMP and
Right, right.
4 inch.
Yeah,
But that thing is, it's great. It's just loud. It's so loud. It's
yeah. Right,
wildly loud.
right.
Uh, but yeah, it's just as you were saying, like you really had back then. You had to plug into so many different amps to really find the tones and kind of narrow down what where your sound starts and ends, and that's was really the journey for me. It was always trying to find my tone. It took a while,
Right.
but I knew what I liked, and I knew how to with the equipment available. I always figured out how to make it work for me.
Yeah,
And I went through it all. So
yeah.
like but like just for a great example is for I was playing Marshall super leads. I want to say I had a 69 super lead. No, yeah, probably a 69 super lead. And then I had a super bass, a 72 super bass,
Yep.
both 100-watt heads. I had them modified, and they worked well for me for quite a while. And but then it was funny. I had a friend who had a deluxe reverb. I can't remember whether it was modified or not, but
Hmm.
I remember plugging into it, and we kind of turned it up, and I was like, "Oh my God, this sounds better than my Marshalls." And and it hit me like that's when I read about sometimes Eddie Van Halen used to say some of the early sounds were Fenders.
Yeah,
So like
the
he
bandmaster.
actually a bandmaster,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah,
He
yeah.
really loved those tones, and I like. And as I got older, I've been leaning more towards that, even though I do love Marshalls. The joke is it's really trying to make your Fender sound like a Marshall
Right,
when you
right.
have a
Yeah.
Marshall.
Yeah, because we went through that whole thing, you and I, where we started out with like we said, the either that era, the the very clean plexis, unless you
Mm-hmm.
blew your head off. And then the Rhodes, that JMP era, it was, the AC/DC kind of thing, right? But then it was super overdrive in front of the super overdrive or tube screamer in front of the
Yep. In
JMP.
front of
And
it.
then we
Yeah.
went through the ADA, MP1s and that whole, even up to, I guess when the Bean came out, the first Line 6 Bean came out. It's like,
Yeah.
it was like a big moment, right? That's really where we started this transition to fractal and all these different things.
Well, that's how long really I've been in the industry. So, as a gear editor, back in the day, back then, I've seen everything come down the pike, every iteration. I remember the first that NAMM show I went, and Line 6 unveiled the Axis 12 or 212.
Yeah,
That was the first modeling amp. And I remember plugging into it, and I was like, it was like, here you had the SRV tone and the Edges tone, and here's a really rotten, modded Marshall. And I remember plugging in, it had that sort of a what do you call, like a matrix type of front panel,
mm-hmm.
and playing. I think I still actually own it. It's probably not working, but I still have it here
There you go.
somewhere.
Right.
Um, but I remember plugging into it, and I was like, oh wow, it was the first time I'd ever heard anything like it. It was just so great. But then, you pull that stuff and you put it in front of a band, you're just like, oh, it's just not working.
Right.
And then every year when they kept on, when Line 6 kept on, refining it, then they had I keep forgetting, first of all, then the amplitude comes out, and then they like all the amplifiers that were all modeling amplifiers, and they kept on getting better. And I remember like, wow, some of these were pretty good, but then every time I put them in front of a band, there was always something lacking. So my joke would always been, every time I see the Line 6 guys every year, I'd go, tell you what, this thing sounds great. I can't wait to see what you come up with next year,
Right.
And that's how it's been for me. It's been like every year I saw the improvements, the growth in the modeling sphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that space.
Mm-hmm.
And now never thought I'd ever say it, but like modeling has eclipsed tube amps at this point. Like, and a lot of the young kids they're just using their, quad cortexes, the fractal, the Kempers, the Helix, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And not to, these are all great units. It just comes down to which one works best for your needs, and again, we're at this point where I'm just like, wow, the technology is really, really impressive now.
Right. I was going to say, when you're talking about, all these reviews you've done over the years, and how
Mhm.
I think it was Reverb just put out a list about the top, I forgot, was it amplifiers, or they actually, this was the first time that modelers had eclipsed amps. And
Best-selling amps of 2025, and only two tube amps, I think, made it to the list, but they were way down in the list. So, and it's just amazing. Like that, again, it's the way the industry works. It's just like, you introduce something and you just keep pushing it out there, and pretty soon everyone starts to adopt it. I mean, you just look at it in the same way as the iPhone, smartphones, right?
sure.
There was a time when we were all using, flip phones and stuff like that, and suddenly Apple comes out with this iPhone, and suddenly you realize you have a computer in your hand that's that's better than an actual standalone computer or some in certain laptops. And so that's where it's evolved, and now everyone is using smartphones. It's just like the way the industry pushed that out of the way, and I think that's where, not to say it's going to disappear. I don't think it'll ever disappear with tube amps,
Right.
but at the same time, I think everyone's doing this modeling thing that, when you're young, if you're 12, 13 years old and you're just playing guitar, yeah, you're going to buy a model. You're not buying a tube amp.
Right.
It'd be
Right.
insane. That's because everything is there at your disposal. And most of these kids they're not playing out like you and me. They're all playing at home, playing on the computer, posting channels. So that, to me, that makes more sense.
Sure.
Tube amp is just too loud for
Yeah.
certain things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And it's pretty, you get pretty quick results with whatever model or you want to, whatever you want to dial up. I mean, the fractal,
yeah,
it's incredible. I have a small box in the back here.
yeah,
And when I brought my fractal up with the small box on my computer speakers, it was like, I couldn't believe it. I was
yeah,
like, wow, that is it. I mean, if you're plugged in and mic'd up, I mean, the kind of thing.
sure.
Right.
It's real convincing, like as you just mentioned before, like the IK Multimedias or the Tonex, the whole captures for the Eddie Van Halen stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, just hearing it through like some of like these just on YouTube and some of the speakers, and it's just like, Christ, this sounds just like the album, like they isolated the guitar track, and so yeah, it's really good. Um,
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how that stuff. Well, I know there are certain guys who play in the Van Halen tributes are using some of
Oh,
these
yeah. Of course.
these
Yeah.
captures and apparently to great effect. So that's amazing.
Yeah. That is amazing. That brings me to the Van Halen gear sphere.
Mm,
As we see in the background here, you've got a few things. Uh,
yes.
so, so they're even making this move now with this new hybrid amp they're doing. They actually just announced this thing, and it's interesting to see Eddie Van Halen's company evolve. What do you've been around him and this whole gear thing with him back in the early days. I said this before on here. Eddie didn't seem like he really wanted to give out his secrets or have signature gear. And then that sort of changed at a point, and then of course evolved to being what it is with Fender.
Mhm.
His impact on gear. How speak to that and how I just for me, it's like every time it comes out on any model, I want to hear what their
Yeah.
version of this is. And obviously, this is something he, like we talked about, worked himself through many phases of. But tell me what you think of his whole gear moves.
Well, I mean, where to start? I mean, I'll tell you that, and I've said this for a really long time. Uh, None of us, and I'm speaking on the wider industry,
Sure.
with all the guys, all my friends and colleagues, and people I've met along the way who at the NAMM shows and stuff like that, and people who work at the brands and the manufacturing part of it.
Hmm.
Let's be clear. None of us would have jobs if it wasn't for Eddie Van Halen. He revolutionized the industry in a way that nobody ever before him. I mean, like, yes, obviously Hendrix obviously made the guitar more widespread, more noticeable, more recognized, right? It became, a lot of people were influenced by that. Clapton really created this vocabulary for guitar players, right? With his blues and with Cream and everything else he's done. But really, when it comes down to like someone who just changed the whole landscape of the industry, it really, to me, there's nobody else like Eddie, because Eddie, when when you go, like pre Eddie, there was only like certain guitars available. It was the Fender Stratocaster, the Gibson Les Paul, or whatever. It was either Gibson and Fender, and then of course you had the other things like the Hamers, the Deans, and other iterations. But they were all basically offshoots of what Gibson and Fender were producing. But Eddie comes along, he throws a humbucker and a Strat, and suddenly he changes everything. And then suddenly, then everyone started worrying about putting humbuckers in Strats, and then changing the tremolos, made locking tremolos, and then getting more gain out of your amp. So every aspect of the guitar was changed. Like, and just the finishes, just think about, it was like black, red, candy apple red, sunburst. That's the thing with red. But suddenly everyone's, he's like, oh, we can like put graphics on, and like he puts these bicycle stripes on his guitar, and everyone's like, oh my God, who is this? He was a disruptor. And next thing you know, it's like everybody wanted to be him. But he changed everyone's mindset that there was nothing that you couldn't do. So the fact that amplifiers now have multiple channels, that's Eddie, I think. I mean, not to say that wasn't there before. Like Mesa Boogie was kind of doing that, I would say, but really the making it so mainstream was really Eddie. having more gain in your amp, effects loops, things like, all custom wound pickups. I mean, yes, DiMarzio no doubt really changed the industry with the introduction of the super distortion. But then you have a guy like Eddie. Well, how do I get to Eddie's sound? And then suddenly everyone's tweaking their pickups, or they wanted to make things sound like this. So Eddie just every part of what he did made people perk up and notice. Like even the fact, like the Phase 90, was something country guys was using in like outlaw country, and here's Eddie using it in front of in the first Van Halen album, flanger, the way he used the flanger. It was just like all these things that Eddie grabbed whatever was available and just made it work for him. And so it made the whole industry go, well, wait a minute, we need to follow suit with this. Like we need to in order to get this sound, you need to buy this. We'll create this. And so Eddie's all those things. But anecdotally, I will say what Eddie meant to me. I have to tell a story about my wife.
Okay. Cool.
I was at it. So when you talked about like, what about his part of gear and starting to introduce his gear. Well, I was at the NAMM show where Eddie was going to introduce his EVH line, I believe. He was actually talking about his Frankenstein guitar. He had that the custom shop did, made for him and things like that. So it's a bunch of stuff that he was introducing at the NAMM show. And so Fender invited me to the party, to the press event for that. And it was after the show. And it was at 6:00 after the show, we had to go to the press event because Eddie was going to be there. So I remember at the time, with the flip phone, my wife, who's much younger than I am, she calls me and she's like, "Hey, what's up?" And I go, "Nothing. I just finished this. Just got off the floor. I gotta go. I gotta go to this press conference. Eddie Van Halen is going to talk about his new guitar and stuff." And she literally is like, who the fuck is Eddie Van Halen? And I'm like, what? Like, yeah, who the fuck is Eddie Van Halen that you can't stop and talk to me? I'm like, well, like, you like, and I sat there for a minute because I know sometimes she's asking me like, who are these Rolling Stone guys? I don't know these Rolling Stone guys. Anyways, like, so Van Halen was one of those things. She's like, who's Eddie Van Halen? I was like, and I literally sat on the phone and I'm thinking to myself, like, how do I explain in like 1 minute to her who Eddie Van Halen is? And I go, okay, well, as first I said, none of us would have jobs if it wasn't for Eddie Van Halen. She goes, well, that means nothing to me. And I go, okay. And then I go, and I thought about those, remember those computer commercials remember was the guy, he goes, "Hey, I'm a Mac." And this guy, "Hey, I'm a PC." And it was a nerdy guy who was the PC in the commercial. Right. And then the cool young guy, he was a famous actor. I can't remember his name. But he was the cool Apple product. And I remember, so I was like, you remember that, that commercial with those two computer guys, where the nerdy guys, the PC, and the cool guys, the Apple? Yeah. Eddie Van Halen's the Apple guy. It's like everyone wants to be the Apple guy right now, that dude. And he's like, because the other guys all the other stuff is Square, and that's the rest of the industry. And he goes, but that guy, that's who Eddie Van Halen is. And then then of course I said, I think I may have mentioned a song or two that she goes, "Oh, okay, I know that song." And then, but anyway, that's really what it was. I mean, if you really think about it, he made guitar cool. Simple as that. There was everyone wanted to be Eddie Van Halen at one point. I mean, even me, who I remember hearing the first album, and I was in Europe at the time. I was a kid, and my cousin had the album, and I remember putting on, Running with the Devil on the vinyl, and hearing that, I was like, "Whoa, what is this?" And I heard Running with the Devil, and I was like, "Okay." I thought that was kind of cool. I didn't care for the song all that much the first time, but then following that was, well, was Eruption, and I was just like, "Holy crap, what is that?" And it wasn't so much the second part of Eruption; it was the first part of Eruption that just blew me away. I just never heard a guitar playing that fast and that with so much fire. It was just like, I just remember kept putting that back. And then of course, hearing the whole tapping bit was really impressive. But at the time I was so young, I was just like, I didn't even make the connection that was a guitar. I thought it
Hmm.
was something, I thought it was a synthesizer,
Right.
but turns out it was, back then. But I was so blown away by that first part of Eruption. But so even back then, I wasn't the biggest Van Halen fan. I was more like, when I was that age, I was very big Queen, The Sweet, AC/DC. Those are like the bands I really gravitated to as a young kid. But then Van Halen comes along, and I'm just like, okay. And then it wasn't until about Van Halen 2, and or when I got into my first band, I started to really like Van Halen. Was like, oh my god, I gotta. Then of course, if I have early pictures of myself, you'll see I took my Aria Pro to my first guitar, and I put stripes. It was just like I mean, I'm sure everyone, I'm not alone on this. I know everybody
Uh,
has a similar story to this.
oh
Everyone
yeah,
did.
it is. It's so weird to me that he had such a common inspiration for so many people, like literally millions of people, like you and I, like the thing you just said. Were inspired to, if not repaint your guitar, to do something that it mirrored his adventurism with whatever he was messing with. Yeah, like he messed with everything.
He had such an he had just it was such an impact, I think, on everyone. It was felt worldwide. I think even if you didn't really care for the music, you couldn't not recognize the incredible talent and what he was doing, how he was pushing the guitar forward. It was a gravitational pull for everybody. It was just like everyone I knew, we all was like, how did he get that? Like, because that's really what's really amazing about it, is because is you had to have lived during that time. No, like me, just even me, like I just said that earlier, like going through a million Marshalls. Guess what? No Marshall sounded like that. There
Right.
was no Marshall that out of the box sounded like that. You could try all you want. No one did that. But it took a little bit of having to figure out what Eddie was doing in order to make your Marshall sound like that. But
Right.
out of the box, no Marshall sounded like that. So it was all those things. Everyone was just like, how is he? Everyone just scratched their heads and started going like, how is he doing that? And that really was what made him so appealing. It was just because Eddie was just one of those players that, you know, that I think his influence to me was more about, I love the fact that everything Eddie did, he just went for it. He was never schooling. He never was schooled about it. He was always like, you watch him play, it was just like Eddie it was like he was, swimming upstream. He was just going for whatever he was feeling at the moment. There are so many other players who are far more, who are far more, I don't want to say premeditated, but more schooled,
Hmm.
by more, probably more contemplative about what they're playing.
Right.
But like Eddie that was the thing, is like, this guy you threw him in the middle of the arena, and he just like just took out everybody else. It was that's how good he was. And so that was what I always appreciated. It was like, was never to think, as we say in musician circles, I think, therefore I clam. So
Right.
you definitely don't want to overthink what you're doing. And
You're thinking you're stinking. Is that?
yeah, if that's what happens, that's what happens. That's how you end up with clamming a lot of notes. If you end up putting too much thought into what you're doing. Eddie just kind of went for it. Even the genius too of Eddie was also the fact that he could make a mistake sound right. So it was just a lot of things. And again, and the small things too that I always loved about Eddie was just like my favorite songs from Van Halen are probably not what a lot of other guys' favorite songs from Van Halen. Like I just because it was less the virtuosic stuff. It was always about the texture of his tone and the
Mhm.
things he was pulling out of that guitar. Like I love like Everybody Wants Some. Like just just the sounds he was pulling out of the guitar. I wanted to to explore that. Like I was like, how's he getting that guttural sound? And it turns out he was flipping the guitar behind. He ripped out the back cover of his Strat, and then he was like scraping the springs. I was just like, oh, how fucking cool. I mean,
Right.
just stuff like that. I mean, like no one would approach that because everyone else is just so like, well, I'm going to play a Dorian scale of, it's like, it
Right.
was more that Eddie didn't care about that. Eddie was like, he was trying to, whatever notes he was trying to go for, he was just going for them and not thinking about it. So, I mean, you'd have to ask him that, but I don't, but he's not around to answer that, but still, he was one of a kind.
Yeah. So you said, so which album was your favorite?
Oh, well, my favorite album, I mean, I think everyone who listens to Van Halen, they all go to Van Halen too. And I bounce between, I love Diver Down.
Right.
I think Diver Down's a great album because I'll tell you why. I think from the moment the track opens with
Where have all the
Where Have
good
All the Good
times?
Times Gone,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
His guitar sound on that album, I just love that sound. It's not incredibly distorted, but it's so there. It's right in your face.
Right.
And and when he hits all when he whacks the strings, those noises just pop out. Even like that in the beginning, that first song, and when he goes bam now now, and then you hear
Right.
him creak the springs of the guitar. I love that. I think that's amazing. It's like he pulls it up. You could just hear all the little nuances, like even when he hits a harmonic just as an accent point. It's just really great. And then his playing on Hang 'em High. I mean, Jesus Christ, that solo is one of my favorite Van Halen
Oh
solos.
yeah,
It's
that's the killer, man.
so good. And you could hear it's not really it's not a thought out solo. You can hear him. It just sounds like he's going for it. And that's the thing with, so like as I said before, he's just, everything he did, he just went for it. And it's just like, I love that album. But I will say, I still come back to the first album as like as a part of, like, if I'm just listening to Van Halen, I tend to go back to the first album because
Mhm.
I think for anyone who loves Van Halen, it's all there. The songs, I think the songs, the playing, uh, just just a different amount of song, just a different amount of styles on the first album, right? I
Mhm.
mean, like it's more of the, I guess, the radio hit with Jamie's Crying, and then and of course, Feel Your Love Tonight. It's just a great groove on that. Then of course you have the guitar playing stuff like On Fire, um, and of course Eruption and all that. But I'll tell you, my one of my favorite moments, I think, is Atomic Punk is my favorite song on that album.
Mhm.
Is just what Eddie's play, the way he's playing on that song is, he's not out to really, like, because his solo is nothing, it's nothing to, like, you know write home about. It's a great solo. It serves the song, which is what I love.
Right.
But it's like, but the fact, like, you listen to Atomic Punk and he's scraping the strings with that Phase 90, and you're just like, what the hell is that? It's just that sound, and then playing that, like the octave rhythmic thing that he's doing throughout the verses is just so cool. But really, the cherry on top for that song to me is the ending of the song, is when, it's like when they bring it just at the end, where Eddie just like is like, the atomic doubt doubt doubt, wow.
Right.
And that just the way they stutter that ending, and then they completely pull the brakes on it, and then Eddie just, he hits that final, whatever, the chord, and then his guitar starts that beautiful feedback, and he starts, it's like it goes woo, and like you hear like the feedback crescendo till he gets to that high note, and it's like woo, and then he just pulls that up, and it's like bow, and it was just like, holy shit, what did I just hear? It was just amazing. It's like, we only, like, that's the thing, is like, when, if any guitar player has ever wanted to, like, sit there and try to coax feedback out of their amp. They want to coax that moment because that was a perfect moment. You don't get moments like that as far as trying to draw that kind of feedback where like it starts to go into that, you know, whatever the, I guess the upper harmonic or the fifth, or, and then it just, then it just gets to the top of it. And you're like, oh my God, that's what you want your amp to do.
I tell you what, that's true. You know, that's one of the things too that about that Tonex plugin that's really odd is that he's managed to somehow get that weird natural feedback that Eddie had in those records to happen within a plugin, which it doesn't do that in my Fractal. Whatever he did there and however they did that, I'm still not sure how that works, but it does that thing. Like,
Really?
yeah, it's weird
Would
because
you have to turn up? Would you have to turn it up to in order to get
no,
there?
I was
Like
doing
with
it in
your,
front of my studio monitors right here, you know, it was like that. I told him when I saw him, he came to one of my Van Halen shows, and I was like, dude, I don't know how you guys pulled that off, but that little detail
yeah.
of how it, you know, with the Variac kind of feel and that natural feedback, the way that it feeds back, I just like I couldn't believe you do it in digital in any kind of plug-in ever. I mean, it just blew my mind. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it does. It's like counterintuitive for that. It doesn't make sense for it to do a digital version wouldn't be able to generate
shouldn't be able
that.
to
Right.
do that, right? Yeah,
But
it
that does,
does.
that's amazing. It says a lot. That says
It's
a lot.
it's weird. I had told a few people about it because I just, you know, had done a whole video on it where I just sat here all day and played through all the different amps and I just kept noticing that and I was like, well, that is wild. I've never had that on any plugin happen. And
Wow.
yeah, so yeah, you have to check that out. It's amazing. But yeah, those when I think about endings on that first record, you know, he was like
Hmm.
he almost. Well, I don't say wouldn't say he invented that kind of thing. Obviously, you would do those kind of wild endings back in the classical days, probably back with Mozart. They probably had those kind of types of endings, but in the rock context, something like at the end of "I'm the One," where he just rips down that the scale and just
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
I don't know. I think it's just because of the sound and everything. It just sounds so intense the
Hmm.
way it comes across. You could watch 100 people do it, and it would never come across like this at all. I mean, it's so hard to capture whatever they captured. That
Well, a lot of it was that the other thing that's great about Eddie was it's his attack, right? There was his attack really jumps through this through the speakers. You really hear, like as you just said, like when he does that, it's how
yeah.
he accents each note, and he was so good at it. But like, and the same thing for me. It's like for like the other song that really off the first album that was the solo to Ice Cream Man. Like I heard that, I was like, Jesus Christ! Like when I heard that, I was just like, that's the way I want to play guitar. It's like with that same kind of like that kind of bluesy thing with the same fire. And it was just, when you watch him play it, you're just like, it's just stunning to watch that when I remember, I thought, when I finally actually got around to actually being able to play it, I thought he was tapping it. But then I would watch when you first started seeing actual videos, he's picking all those notes. I'm like, Jesus Christ, this guy's amazing.
Right.
It's like Eddie. So it was just amazing. It was just so great. Oh, and while I'm on that, the other thing why I really like some of the early stuff is as a guy who's been playing guitar forever, uh, I just love the fact that Eddie was using a standard Fender tremolo on all those things, and he was able to bring it back in tune. He figured out a way. I was told how he did it, but he
Right.
was just but he was able to always bring it back in tune. But the thing about, I mean, anyway, you probably know, is just like when the advent of like the Kahlers and the Floyd Roses started to show up on guitars, as I watched that evolution as a guitar player, I saw that come up. um the Floyd Rose I liked more than the Kahler, because
Mm-hmm.
the Floyd Rose had a really great throw, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not the same throw as a vintage tremolo. It just doesn't react the same. It's more pronounced, it's more exaggerated. You don't get the same nuances you get with, say, a Fender tremolo, which is why I always loved, like when Eddie's certain solos when he was using the Fender trem, like even when he was downing the G note, or when he would just like, wow, it was just, there was that range of throw
Hmm.
It's just different. It's more musical. Whereas the Floyd's like, wow, it's in your face. It's more exaggerated. Whereas like the others more nuanced, and it's just there's something to be said about
That's
that.
true.
I
All
think.
those tremolos are different. Like the Maestro. I got the new Hendrix, reproduction V, the Love Drops, and it has the Maestro. And I had never
Mhm.
really had one, and it's a whole different animal than
Sure.
Floyd or maybe the no Bixby. I haven't used much either, but on all these Pat Benatar songs, Neil Galdro's using a Bixby all the time, and it's like you can't really get that out of a Floyd. Maybe full floating you can kind of get close, but it's
Well,
really
I think Neil was using a Strat during the very early
early days. Yeah.
Benatar. Like,
Yeah.
so he was using one of those. I remember the Strat too. It was one of those. Forgot the name of the actual model, but I remember at the time. But anyway, but that's like when you listen to like on Pat Benatar, what you're gonna do? Hit not
You
Jesus,
better,
what's the
you
name?
better, you better run.
You better run. Yeah, like his playing on that. It's like it's like we're down out, wow. Like that's a standard tremolo. You hear that? It's just that slight throw adds just enough, and it's just so cool. I think
Right.
there's something to be said for that particular. Like I said, I just love the range of a regular tremolo that goes out of tune. But if
Right.
you know but I mean, look, in my main guitar, I'm using a Strat
Uh-huh.
as well, and I haven't modified I'm using a standard Fender tremolo, and I'm able to whack it back in tune. So I mean, it'll obviously I'll do some quick tuning in between, but I figured out a way to keep it in tune as I'm not, as I'm abusing it. So, and I
Right.
think that's what I took from Eddie is just a lot of those little tricks that he was doing that to keep those things working for you. And that's what I loved about it. He's like, whatever was available, he made it work for him, you know, despite its let's say its inconsistencies or sophistication. Eddie always found a way to make the equipment work for him rather than the other way around, you know.
Yeah, that started
So
out really young too. A lot of it about his contemporaries at in the high school days and in those areas have been on, and they talk about how he was experimenting, all the way back to his backyard with his parents' house,
yeah,
and all that stuff. It's amazing that he always had that kind of that those kind of thoughts of just in that way of going about things. No matter what he did, it seemed like he had that very workman kind of like let's just like cut through all the mental thing and just go right to the source, like cutting the horn off of the SG or whatever. It's just insane. But then he would pair that with the incredible like tapping of Mean Streets intro, where you're like, for me, I mean, that's still one of the most difficult techniques to pull
oh,
off.
without a doubt, without a doubt.
And
I still can't do it. So I have a hard time doing that. It's hard.
somebody sent me the Satriani clip again, and I was like, you got to remember that this technique is probably for most people. If you don't do this and you practice it all the time, it is one of the
Yeah.
most difficult things. That I always tell my wife, I said, "You see the tip of my finger? You see that little spot? That's how close you got to be every time to nail what he did." And
But it's having that sense of rhythm too.
oh
To
yeah,
really
the rhythm was insane. Yeah, that whole
so
drummer thing that he had. He had a really cool sense of rhythm. So your favorite, well, let's say, what song would you recommend if you had like somebody like you see all these reaction videos now. What song would you know, tell one of these reaction people to listen to if it was Van Halen or a video or whatever?
I mean, like I mean, what
If they never heard of Van Halen anything,
ooh,
or if they hadn't even seen the videos, what would you rather see them see a video or listen to a song, or if so, which thing would you want them to see?
I don't think it would ever be I don't think it'd ever be a video. It would definitely have to be a song because I always subscribe to the theater of the mind, right? It's more
Right.
like that's how I grew up, listening to music. It was always like you wouldn't know anything about the artist, but you try to, as you listen to it, you started to figure out more about it. Was just always like imposing your thoughts on I like when I would hear an album, I didn't know who the guitar players were, but then I would look at the album and listen to it because I could pick out who played what. It was just an intuitive thing. You almost like it was almost like profiling.
Right,
You
right,
almost
right.
knew what guy did what in the band, and then you would. And so it was always better to really. That's how you really enjoyed music, was just to listen and just hear how it affects you. But if there was a Van Halen song that I would pick, man, I don't know. I mean, obviously, you would have to go with the obvious things, sort of like obviously the eruptions and um, I'll tell you one of my favorite. As I get old, not as I get older, but as like songs that meant a lot more to me later in life from Van Halen would be would like I love Romeo's Delight on Women and Children First. Like
Sure.
there's so much going on in that song. It's like it's like so he's doing everything. He's doing the volume swells, he's doing the harmonics, he's doing the little rhythmic part where he lowers the volume at did. I mean, just great
Oh yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Like there's so much going. Then of course the wild solo and it's just there's a lot going on in that song. May not be the best Van Halen song, but I mean for me, I listen to that song, I go, I hear something new every time I hear it. I think it's such a great song. I love that tune.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
Like how he would. I always say this about Beautiful Girls at the end because when you go
yeah,
through, you learn these songs. You go, he practically didn't play one fill that was the same the whole outro.
no,
It's like, and
yeah,
everyone's unique. It's like the vocabulary that he amassed over those early years was
yeah.
insane. And I was like, why do you got to make it so hard on me, bro? I like have to learn 35 fills back to back.
Yeah. I mean, I also think a lot of it, again, for me, playing in bands for so long, you start to, uh, if you play with the same people for a long time, you start to get a sort of this, you know, unspoken communication. And I think a lot of how Eddie played and wouldn't have been possible with any other drummer outside except his brother. So like you listen to the way Alex plays and you listen, Eddie is totally feeding off of Alex every step of the way. So having that sort of chemistry together, I think Eddie already anticipated what his brother would do in a way that he would know the right fill to put between, I guess where he could find that pocket. It was
Yeah,
always
that's interesting that you're saying that because when I'm thinking of those fills, I think of the drum
Mhm.
fills that are with those fills. Yes, they're kind of
Yeah,
complementary in there.
right,
I think
exactly.
about it.
Perfect. That's the perfect way to say it. Like him and his brother complemented each other no matter what, whatever. Like, and when they found a little space to do something, they did it, and they both, and somehow it worked. And I think it's that, and I honestly believe it's a lot to do that the fact that they played together from the start, right? And nothing has ever changed. It was always that. So, Eddie just knew nothing. Eddie was just like, that's how I'm going to play with that, with my
It's also
brother.
been said that it's right, in those kind of scenarios that Roth was doing certain things and Eddie was kind of
Mhm.
answering those things. And then in what we're talking about here, even Alex is in and on this whole thing. They're all kind of ebbing and flowing with these different vibes, with this different vibe at the end of the song.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, that's a good point, and it's also that's another thing that I'd like to say is that you have to imagine like you have this powerhouse duo of Alex and Eddie Van Halen, just laying it down, but to be able to actually kind of carve out your own space and identity, you got to give Roth and Michael Anthony so much credit for being able to stand out when you amongst these two giants on guitar and drums. And they do, it's like that's why people I guess why people had loved Roth in that Roth era is just because Roth brought that swagger with
Hmm.
whether it was with vocally his ad libbing. I mean, even though it's been dissected and made fun of at
Of course, yeah.
in current times, but back then it was cool. It was cool as fuck. It was great, and and again, like Michael Anthony with some of the bass lines that he was supporting, and then of his vocal ability, there was just like there again, the chemistry in that band cannot be understated. It was just cannot be overstated. It was just like there's so much going on in that band, and they were just so cool. I mean, like even like I always like it's just funny how each guy sort of pokes out. Like just for example, like I just thought of it as it's like the in Everybody Wants Him at the end when Eddie's like when Eddie's like uh when he's just going when he's just like riding out the chords like and
Oh yeah, yeah,
then but Michael Anthony's bass line in that he's just playing an octave bass line climbing and it just works. It's like boo doo 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 woo doo woo doo. It's just you listen. That just pokes out at me. I go, that's so cool. That actually stood out more than Eddie's guitar at that moment. But that's what I'm saying is just like these guys knew how to play to fill the space with all the right notes and make it work. And that's where you get magic. Eddie is, if I remember correctly, Eddie's not really paying. He's not like the typical guitar player paying attention with his neck. He's actually paying attention to what's going on around him.
right,
And he's feeding off whatever the vibe is, and then when he has to approach it, that's when he starts to inject his personality. And I think that's a big thing, is being able to be aware of the music the musical space that's being created around you, and
right,
then having that confidence to kind of come in and knowing what to play without even thinking about it. I
right,
think, I
right.
think, that's also Eddie's magic. Of course, having a brother who already knows what he's going to kind of knows what he's going to play. It allows Eddie to kind of listen to what's going on rather than just be so focused on his own playing. I think when he gets to his actual technical stuff, yes, that's when Eddie starts to start paying attention. But like half the time, he's just smiling and just doing
Yeah,
his thing.
that was his
And
thing. Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. You were around him some. I don't know how much you've met him or had any time with him, but he had such a. I met him at the Smithsonian, and it was exactly as I imagined after all these years of seeing him, and he just had such a warmth there
mhm,
that it was exactly as I imagined his personality would be.
right.
What was your vibe with him when you were around him?
I only met, believe it or not, for as long as I worked at Guitar World, I only met Eddie once, and it was at a NAMM show. And it was and like the guys, my other editors and publishers, they it was well, you've talked to Chris Gill, my buddy
And to
Chris,
Brad, yeah, both
and
Brad
to
and
Brad,
yeah,
so
yeah,
you know them
yeah.
both. So those are my colleagues, and so they've interviewed Eddie dozens of times, countless, and they're always like, "Oh, we'll take you. We're going to take you. Got to meet Eddie. We're going to bring you." And I'm like, "All right." And it never really happened, but it did happen at the NAMM show thanks to Matt Bruck, because Matt Bruck is Eddie's right hand man, and
Right,
I love
right.
Matt Bruck. Matt's just a wonderful human being, and I remember Matt comes up to me. He goes, "Hey, do you want, he's like, hey, do you want to meet Eddie?" And I'm like going, "Fuck yeah, I want to meet Eddie." He goes, "It's like, you've met him before, right?" And I go, "Never met Eddie." He's like, "Really?" He's like, "Just come over with me." And Matt brought me to this other room, and there's Ed. And I was just like, and he's there with Wolfie. And I was like, he's like, let me get a picture. And I come up to Ed, and I just stood there. I was like kind of flabbergasted. I go, well, "Hey, Ed," and he looks at me. He looks me up and down. He goes, "I know you." And he grabs me and puts me under his arm, and then we took a picture together with Wolfie. And I don't, to be honest with you, I don't remember what happened after that. I was on cloud nine after
Right,
that.
right.
And he goes, "I know you," and he goes, I'm just like, wow, because I mean, I know that Ed, when they first introduced a lot of the EVH stuff, I was one of the very first guys to put it out there on video and things like that. So and Eddie just sort of remembered that, and I guess he must. That's my guess. That's how he know. Why he says, because he's not like he knew me, like we hung out. We never did,
Right, right. Yeah,
but it felt so great.
but it's about yeah, that's that just the
But
interaction like that.
but you're right about his warmth. There was a genuine, just a really nice guy who was just just like when he the everything you read about him. Like I remember reading him in magazines when growing up.
Right,
Just the kind of shy guy who just kind of shy, just wanted to play guitar and be left alone.
right, right,
And
right.
then when he wanted to tell you something, he'll let you know it. But that
Right.
was, I think that was Eddie a lot. It was very much of what you said.
Yeah, yeah. That's like the icing on the cake to all the other things we know about him. Like all of the things that we love about Diver Down and the way that impacts you to have it wrapped in a guy who had that kind of everyman vibe. Like,
Yeah.
it was like he had this, like, he didn't have the typical rock star vibe,
No,
which is
no.
really different for him.
Well, you'd have to ask, more of Brad and Chris on those
Oh
two.
yeah, yeah, I did.
But they have
Right.
great. I mean, they have great stories. But I'm going to tell you, like there's a lot of Van Halen lore out there, and I've been around it. I've been around only because through Brad and Chris. But Chris, if you want someone to give you the proper authority, Chris Gill, my colleague, my former colleague. Well, I guess we're still colleagues. Um, there is no better Van Halen authority. He's seen them back in the day when he was living in California as a young kid, as a youngster, and he interviewed him so many times, and and Eddie just reveals certain things. Like if you want to know when to sift through the BS and what's true, you talk to Chris. Chris is the guy. Like and a lot of times for me, even when I have a Van Halen question, if I'm doing a certain review or writing about something, I go, hey Chris, you know, did Eddie do this? I mean, like, I feel like he did this because I feel like that's the thing I love about Eddie. Because at times I feel like he's a kindred spirit in the
Hmm.
sense that I would have approached it this way back if I didn't have this,
Right.
like keep in mind, everything Eddie did is because it wasn't available and he created it to make it work for him.
Right.
So when I think about, like, when Eddie would rip, pick up out of another guitar to make it work because he thinks that was going to make it sound better or make it sound a certain way, that's that kind of DIY ethic that Eddie had. And so I would, like, for me, and like if I see something, I'd go like, you think Eddie did that? And he goes, no, Eddie, well, he would say, yeah, I think Eddie did that. Or we would or be able to say, yeah, Eddie definitely did that. Like, because he did so much reach. I mean, like, Chris is the kind of guy you want to do who would be able to do an autopsy
Oh, for sure.
and,
For sure.
be able to tell you how he got there.
I need
Like a
to.
lot of people didn't know about just even the EQ, the 10-band EQ he was using,
Right.
just
Right.
all these kind of things kind of emerged, later on.
Yeah.
But it was, if you were paying attention, you were around, you knew about it. And I'm sure you had some other guests who probably said a lot of the same things I'm saying here too.
Yeah, the detail is amazing.
Mhm.
It's so much detail when you go back, even back to the early days when his friends were catching him using the Variac in a little bag. He had it behind his amp, and
Right,
he was
right.
basically hiding the thing from
Yeah.
everybody. And the last guy, he was there, and he kind of like he kept avoiding the Variac discussion, and he finally said, "Dude, tell me what it is."
Right, right, right.
He finally gave it up. So it's like insane how he did that. So let me ask you this about Van Halen concerts. Did you attend many concerts?
I did. I saw them on their last tour with David Lee Roth. I want to say that was, I don't know what year that was.
2015.
Probably around there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
2015. Yeah. Yep.
I saw them at the Garden, and it was a good show. It wasn't great.
Hmm.
And part of the reason was Eddie was having a bad time that night. His
Hmm.
equipment wasn't working for him. Like,
Hmm.
and you could see it. He was getting pissed off at his monitor mix. And when he was trying to like get like that the feedback, he was using his EVH heads and cabinets. And I remember he would go up to the cabinets, try to get the feedback. And as he got too close, it started to go. Instead of getting that, woo, it was like started that high whistle. That, all that, it was like, and you could see it was frustrating him, and he was
Hmm.
getting kind of like just annoyed by the whole thing. But again, to watch it in person, to see him do his thing, you're just like, okay, yeah, this guy's amazing. But David Lee Roth was particularly great that night. He was actually great, which was
Right.
surprising. So it's like the rest of the band carried when Eddie was struggling.
Yeah.
But I did see, I saw Van Halen, the Monsters of Rock
Oh, I did
tour.
too. What
Uh,
which stadium did you go to?
it was Giant Stadium.
There you go.
Uh,
I
Yeah,
was in
Giant
I,
Stadium,
I was Memphis.
MetLife. It was in Memphis, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if you saw the Monsters of Rock tour,
Yes,
right?
I did. Yeah,
So my recollection of that day was very
long,
interesting. It
long.
was a long, yeah,
Even for
it was a
young guys.
long, it was a long ass day. We were out on the field. And it was hot as balls out there, and I was getting a redneck because the sun was unrelenting. It was so brutal. So I was getting sunburned on the back of my neck. Kingdom Come comes out first. They do their best Led Zeppelin, and
Yeah, I remember.
they were pretty good, actually. They weren't terrible. I was actually impressed by them. And then after them, I
Yeah.
think it was Dokken.
No,
Maybe
Dokken
it
was
was.
Metallica came out before Dokken.
Oh, I think it was. I think you're right. I think it was Metallica. And Metallica comes out, and they were good. To be honest, I do not remember them at all. I was just like, it was okay. I wasn't into. I don't think I
Okay.
was really married to that new metal, that metal sound at the time.
Right, right.
Uh, but they were. But again, they came out. They were good.
That was pre Black Album though. That was before.
Oh yeah, this was like
Yeah,
probably what
yeah. That was Master of Puppets, right?
Master of Puppets. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it was Master of Puppets. And I remember hearing them do that. I was like, oh, this is fucking great.
They had
I
Sanitarium.
remember that.
Sanitarium was like their ballad on that one. I think if that's
Yep,
right.
yep. And then I remember Dokken come. Was it Dokken after
Yeah,
them?
Dokken came out. Yeah,
Dokken came out, and then another again. George was just having the worst time with his equipment.
yeah.
Like you could see, he had racks of vintage Marshalls, and I was a huge Dokken fan at the time, and they were a real letdown because they were just not good.
Yeah.
And George was like, George was playing. He was doing his thing. There was a couple things he was great, but he was like, again, he was struggling. You could sense him struggling, and he wasn't as good as I wanted him to be. And so I was just like, all right, whatever.
Yeah.
So Dokken was a little bit of a letdown for me, especially being such a huge fan. And
Yeah.
then and him being an incredible influence. I mean, I ate up tooth and nail that album in high school. My God, I loved that album. Like his playing on that album is just incredible. I stole so much stuff from that album. So anyway,
I love
I
that one too.
digress.
That was awesome.
After that, the Scorpions come out, and the Scorpions were great. Like just polished, just owned the stage. They were awesome, and they were really good. And I was into the Scorpions at the time as well, and I thought they were really good. They delivered.
Right.
And then it was Van Halen, right? So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm kind of excited as I've never seen Van Halen before. Like this is like, I'm kind of bummed because it's like it's Sammy Hagar,
Right.
but they come out. I just remember Eddie comes out, and that guitar sound from that. I just remember that was when Eddie was like had that really wide chorusy Marshall-y sound.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he was using the Eventide stuff and getting that wide spread. And he comes out, and I just hearing that guitar sound. I just right there and then I go, okay, he is the king of that. Like there's nobody better than Eddie. Like he comes out the authority of him. What was the song?
The opening song was Mine Oh Mine, I think.
What is it? I'm sorry.
Mine Oh Mine was, I think, the opener.
Maybe. What's the one where he's tapping do 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 do. What is that song? He's tapping that opening on the 12th frets.
Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about, though. Yeah,
I can't remember.
It's off OU 812.
I think it was off OU 812. Right,
yeah,
I think that's right. And
yeah.
He comes out, and I was just like, Jesus, he is just so good. It was his guitar sound, and he was amazing. Like everything you could imagine. Like, and he comes out, it's just the confidence. He's up there like dancing in the baggy pants and all that stuff, just killing it as a performer, as a guitar player, and then just the guitar sound, everything was all there, everything you could imagine. I was just like, okay, Van Halen, just, man, wow. It was just something else. And so that was my thing. So they were that made the whole day worth it, just to see them, just to say I saw Van Halen back then.
Man, it was hot though, right? We in Memphis, it was insane.
It was hot.
It was so hot. We had this big cup fight it's gone on to be talked about for years. It happened a few places, I think, over that tour, but everybody in the lower levels was throwing paper cups up the stadium, and then it turned into the whole stadium, like throwing stuff around. It was a disaster, but it was so hot, man. I think we got there at maybe 11, and it started around noon or something like that.
Mm.
It was also
Did you ever? I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was saying what were you
no,
going
it
to say?
was it was just so brutal, you know.
Like, yeah, it was a horrible summer that time.
Oh yeah,
But did you see Eddie prior? Like, I mean, did you early the Van
84. So
84?
that
Wow.
was the final. They came through for that tour in January of '84 to
That
Birmingham,
was
Alabama, where I'm from originally. And yeah, I saw it. So my dad and sister went with me because I was just 16. But yeah,
yeah.
that was something. Yeah, it was something to see. At least I got to see the final. But then when they came back through with Roth, in '07, '08, I did 4 shows that year because I was just enthused that maybe this would actually work for a little while. I went to the first show thinking if I don't go to the first show, it may
I
not
mean, not
last a
yeah.
week. And it was
Yeah.
fantastic. The first show was insane. Then the
Wow.
second show was Atlanta, and he was starting to have a little bit of trouble. Then he had some time off, came back in St. Louis, and he was incredible.
Mm,
And Roth and him kind of really hit a good point there for a while where they were both really good. Roth was really
yeah.
strict on the melodies, and so I was really impressed with that tour in particular. But yeah, I did get to see him on the but people tell me all the time about 80, 80, 81. People are just always telling me about him. Like, God, I wish I'd seen that.
Yeah, I mean, like again, like it's amazing now. All these clips are coming out, and within the last couple of years right now, and you're just like watching these early shows, and you're just like, my God, they were fire, like they were the kind of band like they were back then, right? Some of them they were, well, obviously they headline, but there were clips of them just being opening acts, and you're just like, I don't want to follow those guys. Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
These guys are amazing, and Eddie's playing is just so on point. Just yeah,
it's
and
got
you think of like just the gear he was using at the time is just just to cut, some cables into a ran, his phase 90 and all that stuff. Like any of that stuff could have failed at any point, and yet he was making it work. It's like if you knew gear back then, like you basically just rolled the dice because anything in the chain could go out. Nowadays, everything is so sophisticated and dialed in, and
right.
you have all these isolated power boxes and shit like that. But back then, we were still duct taping shit to the fucking floor and hoping it would work for the rest of the gig, and that's what these guys were doing, and God bless them. They were amazing. Those are to me like those early gigs are like always great to watch, like how these guys kind of were trailblazing. They were uncharted territory. They were just making it work and making delivering their impact, really great stuff.
I thought about that. You said that '84 show that came out when they were playing at Downington,
Mm-hmm.
and the way they come out on that stage and with such, it's really seems kind of off the cuff and not so planned. As I remember that tour, I saw that
Mm-hmm.
tour, and in the arenas it was a very planned thing, but
Yeah.
at Downington that seemed more like early days kind of vibes. Like we're just going to go out here and kill it.
Yeah.
There was that danger aspect to it. The
Yeah.
just kind of it was like you just said how crazy the gear was, and like Eddie's over there and putting his own mic against this cabinet. He's like setting it up himself.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy when you really think about it, but
Right.
then them coming out and the ferocity of what they, coming out, it's like some of those grainy, like those clips you could see, but imagine being so far back and you see Van Halen, you're like, they were just like, look like little pins on stage, but these guys, they were running around. They were owning the stage when you watch those clips. So it
Yeah.
says a lot about them as performers, which I
Yeah.
think is great. And it's funny because, having being in guitar world, I've met a lot of my heroes and stuff like that. But Phil Collin was really great from Def Leppard. Was very funny. He told me one time, it's like you got. I was like when I asked him like how it felt, coming into Def Leppard after Pete Willis left the band. And, you have to, he said, you got to keep in mind, like, we were just a pub band. We were playing small stages, and so we're all like being on these small stages. We're all right up on top of each other. Like you look at the early Iron Maiden clips, those
Sure.
guys are all next to each other, right? So they're playing, but next thing you know, these guys are catapulted into the arenas, and suddenly everything changes. And Phil goes, he tells me, he goes, look, he goes, the one thing I learned is like, I no longer could be that guy that played the pub, like standing in one spot, just playing guitar. Everything I did when I started playing arenas had to be more exaggerated. And it was a great piece of advice for someone like, me, like, it's like, so when I play a bigger stage, everything you do, it has to be more pronounced. You need to start moving around, take parts of the stage. Yeah, you'll, give up a little bit of the technicality, but to people who are like, 20, 30 rows back, they don't care about you whether you hit all those notes. They care that, like, they're like, wow, look at, like, they're moving. Like, so he says, all my stuff, like, I gotta do like wide, like big guitar moves, like, pull the guitar up. So when someone who's up in the nosebleeds, they see like, oh, there's Phil, it's
Right.
like those are the things that you make, those exaggerated movements that make the actual show a lot more exciting to watch, to see the performers performing and then, delivering all that stuff. Because like a great example is I remember seeing Rat at the arena, and like they were just boring. I mean,
Hmm.
I was a huge Rat fan, huge Warren DeMartini, incredible influence on my playing. But like I just remember seeing them when they hit the arena. So they were still a bunch of guys from LA, just standing in one spot, just playing and whatever. It just didn't do anything. But when
Right.
you see some of these other guys who are just true professionals, or these are guys who are veterans on big stages, they know how to work a stage. And that was the great thing about Van Halen, is that they still brought that energy to a bigger stage. They were able to make that transition.
Yeah, yeah. They kind of had that in the clubs, and then when they
Mhm.
opened for Black Sabbath and Journey, it was kind of like, oh, who are these guys? Like they're taking the, you know what I mean? Can you imagine like Journey being sort of like, what they were, and Black Sabbath being what they were, and then this other thing that became kind of the
Yeah,
prototype for what we know as these big stage moves, these big rock stage moves. I mean, I don't know, maybe Zeppelin was a little bit like that, in their era, but and I'm sure you had some other bands that were very similar, but Van Halen brought it, and then it just exploded like everything else he did, like every other thing that he did. It was going
yeah,
to permeate and become more popular because he did it.
yeah.
Right?
Without a doubt, without a doubt.
That's crazy, man.
You only have a certain window to make a dent, so make sure
Wow.
you do that. That's it.
I'll ask you one or two more questions.
Sure.
On the technical gear, we were talking earlier about um, all the new gear, and Van Halen and EVH getting into the new, you
Yeah.
know, even in their the new Fender modeler,
Yep.
right?
Correct. Yep.
EVH
Yep.
has their amps in that. Um,
It took a while for them to do that.
yeah, but I do think that maybe Eddie had that in his plan because he had a plan apparently he left behind for the future, and obviously Matt would know. He would keep up with it. Him and Wolf. You know,
Well, I can say, and I don't know if I don't really, I know Matt and Wolfie had a lot to do with that. And I think I think the important thing to stress is that knowing them, they did not want to put it on there unless it was exactly what exactly what Eddie would have wanted. You
right.
know, it had to be perfect. It had to meet
High
the taste
expectation.
test for them. So that's why it may have taken a little longer, but I know Matt, they were incredibly passionate about that, making sure that whatever they brought to the digital space for it, of the Van Halen captures, it had to be right. They didn't want it to be wrong at any point.
Right.
I think
Right.
that's good. I think that says a lot about that the commitment to that, being the integrity of the sound. So,
Right.
because
Right.
that's his legacy. So
Yeah.
you can't mess it up.
But it's amazing, right? That in that short time, relatively, that EVH has been its own brand.
Yeah.
It's dominated so many parts of the business. In the metal space, especially the harder rock space.
It's
And
interesting to see the evolution of it too. It's sort of like,
yeah,
this one, it's amazing. This is incredible in every way. Like I mean, between the, the red, the blue, and the, and
green.
channels, and the green channels, right? They're just so dialed in. It's so good. You can carve out, and it has all the gain you could possibly need. Sometimes you may not even need to go to the red channel because the blue channel so good. Of course, you have that one, which is the EL34 version,
Yep.
which a lot of guitar players like, and I like it. I don't love it. I
Okay.
think the 6L6 version
Is the
to
way to
me
go.
is I love the sound of it. I just think it's closer in spirit to, I think, Eddie's kind of tone, but
Mhm.
or just as a high gain type of amplifier, I think the 6L6 just is a better tube for that. Whereas, like, I'm surrounded by Marshalls here. I mean, I have a Silver Jubilee here and
Mhm.
800, Joe Satriani one over here,
There
and
you go.
Randy Rose. So yeah, I got them
Okay.
all here.
I was gonna say
Uh,
that. I was looking at that one, going, "What is that?" That's the 410 with the Satriani version.
yeah, this is the Joe. This is the. I mean, there's only, I don't know how many were made, but
I
yeah, I
love
have
that.
this.
I love the 410. I
Yeah,
think
everyone loves this, and apparently this is a hot Marshall right now, and
it is.
but I get why it is. I think it's great because of the
Yeah.
noise gate and all that stuff. And
Right.
it's a great one. But yeah, but like for me, the EL34s just have that Marshall thing. And so that's where it works for me. Like I can't picture a Marshall with 6L6s. I mean, there are, but I'm just saying these with the EL34s really work for that Marshall sound. Whereas like this sort of a hybrid where I think the 6L6s really
Yeah.
capture all you know, the definition and
Yeah. Because
the
when he sort of had, when we think of the original sound, we think of it bumped in the mids, right?
Mhm.
But as he gets further in his career, I feel like it's more mid cut.
Yes.
And you get that, and what you get with that is like almost like I know that he said this to John Shanks that he preferred his newer amps because he didn't have to work as hard.
Yep.
And I think that's, if you think about when your amps were mid cut,
Yep.
it's a little more forgiving.
Yep.
You know what I
No,
mean?
and that's a good point, and that's funny you say that because that's the reason why I loved Eddie's early stuff so much. Like you listen to the evolution of Eddie's tone, like his first album, it's incredibly saturated and reverb drenched, and then you get to this Van Halen 2, and it's like it's a little more refined, a little less distortion, but it's great. Then you get to Women and Children First, and I actually like that tone on that album. There's some really good sounds on that album, and the mid range is not as bumped, and it's just more like it's somewhere there. And then then of course he seems to have really get it right by when he gets to Fair Warning, and
Yeah.
but it's still, there's a little bit of that. I don't, Fair Warning is a great sounding album. It's the kind of album that you have to like, I look at it as a tube amp when I listen to my audio gear. You need to turn it up really loud when you start to hear everything starts to come into place. Lower vons, you start to hear the guitar sounds a little smaller, but then you get to diver down, and then you're like, oh, the guitar is like, boom, it's right in your head, right in your face there. It's
Mhm.
real. It's like between like Invader, like the opening for Pretty Woman, and like again, Where Have All the Good Times Gone, and it's just and Hang 'Em High. It's just like his guitar is so in front of you. But this is the cool thing, is like it's not too distorted.
Oh
You
yeah.
can see he's struggling to get some of the notes, but that's really the magic of it. Like you hear like the notes kind of die out on, like, even on, like, say the solo to Hang 'Em High. You hear the note kind of choke out a little bit. But
Right.
like when you get to these amplifiers, no, there's no choking of any note. There's so much gain on this stuff,
Right.
which
Right.
which I think Eddie liked, because the fact that when you listen to the later Van Halen catalog, he's like this. It's like a wall of sound, and so all the notes are clear as day. They punch. They punch with authority, But like, there's something to be said about the early Van Halen, where the Marshalls, because that's the thing about a Marshall. The Marshall is imperfect. They just they're a bit fragile, right, in the tone, and so sometimes the notes, they're not always there. You have to actually work to pull those notes out on a Marshall.
Oh
But
yeah.
that's what made it so great. That's what made him so great, was the fact that he was able to wrench every note that he could out of a Marshall.
for
Part
sure.
of youth, right? It's a great thing. That's what I
That
love
is
about
that's
it.
amazing. I was going to say one more thing before we go.
Sure.
Marshall, what do you think the future for Marshall is?
Oh man.
Is that like that's a big question, right? If they've been moved, they've been sold, they're remanaged, and
I
Jim's
mean,
gone, and
yeah. I mean, I have some good friends at Marshall. Uh, so Marshall obviously has become a behemoth in the consumer space, right?
yeah, right.
I have one, they're like what do you call it? They're Bluetooth
Speaker,
speakers and
yeah,
all, yeah, I have their headphones, they're with all that kind of stuff, and people love it because it's such an iconic brand.
right,
You may not know anything about what it actually is, but it just the way it looks. It's like Apple. It's almost as distinctive as Apple.
sure,
Um, but as you know, Marshall's amplifier space is only like a fraction, not even like it's a blip of what they make. Of making money for the brand.
hmm
So I don't know. I know I will say I reviewed both their Marshall Mod amplifiers
hmm
this past year.
yeah. I saw
I
your
don't know if
video.
you're,
I saw that.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I was a little skeptical at first about, I was like, well, first of all, my initial, when they told me about it about a year ago that they were doing this, I was like, all right. So I was like, okay, this sounds interesting. So but it was gonna be expensive. They were doing these mods, and then when I saw it, I was actually really was even more jarring for me because I looked at both the heads of the JCM 800 and the Plexi, the
mhm,
59 Plexi, and they looked exactly like Marshalls I had when I was a teenager.
right.
It's like they were like, I was like, oh wow, we're gonna leave these like the switches and shit like that. Like these are what my amp technicians were doing back in the day. Like they were butchering the Marshalls.
Oh
Like
yeah,
so, like that's why you can never find like some Marshall that are pristine because everyone was trying to copy Eddie. And in order to copy Eddie, we bought Marshalls and we handed them to an amp guy who fucking put switches in, took out the master volume, added a volume here, ripped, like just destroyed these vintage Marshalls. So I'm looking at this, I'm going, so you're doing what every amp guy did in the 80s, and now we're going to spend $3,000-4,000 for a modded Marshall. But that's where I stop. That's where my bashing stops, because after you plug into these Marshalls, you're like, holy shit, this is exactly what I wanted 25 years ago.
yeah.
It's that good. So whether you wanted more of that plexi, that modified plexi that gives you a lot of flexibility depending on the venue, yeah, it's fucking awesome. If you wanted that JCM 800, that for that more of that mod, more of that, more of that 80s metal sound, with the addition of an effects loop to add your effects, it was hard for me to decide which was a better amplifier. I loved them both for entirely different reasons. My thought process I would probably lean more to the 800, but that may be just me. But I wouldn't, give the stink eye to the 59 Plexi because they were both great.
Right.
However, with what you're saying is like, so that was the last thing that they came out with. It was weird because it was a throwback. It wasn't really something moving the company forward, if you know what I mean. So it's
Exactly.
sort of like you guys are going backwards instead of forwards. And then of course the addition of all those of the signature pedals that did each Marshall, particular Marshalls, and they were good. I don't think they were particularly. They were good. I don't think was going to move the needle forward for them.
Right.
So to answer your question, what do they need to do? I don't know. They definitely need to establish themselves in the digital space. They need to come up with their definitive uh, digital, modeler, or come up with software that captures every one of their amps. Like they literally have to do what Fender did with the Tone Master Pro,
Yeah.
except now be their own authority. Brand it, because guess what? Um, I people like people buy Marshalls. I mean, I have more Marshalls here than anything else. but because people love the look of a Marshall. When you stand behind a Marshall, it automatically think people take you seriously. You know
Right.
what I mean? They go, "Oh, this guy plays guitar." He's like, it also makes you look cool. I mean, and so you can't play, you won't play a lick of a note, but if you stand in front of a Marshall, people go, "Oh, this guy's fucking cool," you know, whatever. That's why I always wanted a Marshall, because all my heroes were playing Marshalls in the clubs. If I had a Marshall behind me, I was like, people would take me seriously, and that's really what it is. So there's that authoritative thing about a Marshall, and so Marshall needs to kind of really work on defining their particular sound, whether it's the plexi sound, like not the plexi setting on a line 6 fucking Spider, but
Right.
a real
Right.
plexi sound,
Right.
or the definitive JCM 800 sound, yes, or surprisingly the 900. Let me tell just as an aside, I remember when the 900 series came out. I was like, you know, that Nigel Tufnell, like it goes to 11. And I was just like, oh my God, this has more gain. I'm going to buy it. I bought the 900 brand new. I brought it home. I plugged it in. I start playing. I go, this is fucking terrible.
Oh
I was
wow.
so upset. It was such a terrible amp. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, I literally, that's it. That's what it does. And I'm like, holy crap, I just spent thousands of dollars and this 900 was terrible. Like I couldn't sell it fast enough. So I got rid of it, and I ended up buying a 78 Marshall JMP at the time, which
Mhm.
was better than that 900. I'll tell you that much.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I've had every iteration of Marshall in, you know, come through my, you know, my ranks. But anyway, but for some insane reason, suddenly the 900 has grown to become popular again. Some
Huh.
people found a way to make it sound interesting, and now obviously with some wisdom, I know how to make a 900 sound really good.
Okay.
So, but again, off the bat, it wasn't what I thought was what it was going to be.
Right.
So, but Marshall needs to enter, like I think it needs to enter the digital space with their own sort of Helix, you know, their Marshall Stadium or their Marshall, you know, Tone Master Pro, just being authoritative voice, brand it really great. They need to capture what is that Marshall sound that maybe a younger audience who may not know what that means. They need to sort of put that out there so that people go, oh, so that's what it is. Just like, you know, like when you buy a Porsche, you know the kind of car you're getting. You
Right.
know, you need to, like, or anything else. It's just like when you buy a Strat, you kind of know what you're getting. So or a Les Paul for that matter. It's really just establishing or maintaining that identity for a newer generation.
That's such
You
a
know,
great identity, you know, and when, you know, you probably met Jim back in the day, and he was
I
such
did.
such a, you know, great guy, and amazing. You know, when he'd do the NAMM shows, he would just sign all day long, and he would meet
Yeah, he was great.
everybody. He was just an amazing man, and I just loved him, and I loved his amps, and yeah, I just wish the best for them, and that they can do like you said, find a way into the new space, use that amazing legacy. You know, even with their like do in-ears or something, like they've already got some of that technology. They could even get into that space. They could go a lot of places.
I mean, yeah, the floor is open for them. Again, it's really maintaining your brand, you know, of evolving your brand, but also keeping the historical part of it, you know, still on the lips of everybody moving forward, you know, because the last thing you want is to disappear, right? Like great amp, like look at High Watt, you know, like High Watt's I had a High Watt,
Hmm.
the loudest fucking amp I've ever had. Everything they said about a High Watt being loud, it is exactly that. But I got to get rid of it because I thought I was going to go deaf at some point because I just kept wanting to turn it up. But
Right.
again, like High Watt was a brand, like the Who, Floyd, you know, all like, but somehow it's getting erased through history, you know. So you have to maintain that legacy. It's like if you let it slip away, people will forget about you, you know.
Yeah, it's like with EVH, you know, they got to keep pushing the envelope and keep, you know, going new places and continuing. They can't just rest on whatever. I know Eddie, you know, he always did that. He was always pushing, no matter what thing he was pushing with. He was going for it.
Yeah. He definitely was, but I think EVH is in good shape because like Wolfie is a great ambassador for the brand, and he really is. He's an admirable guy because just he's really like honoring his father's legacy in ways that are just not that are in ways that really put him in this for people to remember him, but he's also carving his own legacy and maintaining. He's a great, you know, um, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but he's just been great in just keeping his father's legacy alive without interfering in it. He's just because he's also a talented singer and songwriter and guitar player, bassist. I mean, the kid's got it all. He's got all the talent his father gave him all that stuff, but
Oh
he
yeah.
also is incredibly savvy and smart about it. And so I think he's perfect, and he's the opposite of what you would call a nepo baby, right? He's
Yeah.
just one of those kids who's just he's trying to carve out his own legacy as well as maintain his father's, and I think he's done an incredible job at it. And having Matt Bruck also there too is another great thing
I was gonna
because
say,
Matt's
yeah, Matt's always been by his side and knows where Eddie probably, like Don Landy knew about Eddie in the studio. Matt Bruck knew about Eddie for everything else,
absolutely.
everything else that he ever would have thought of or talked to him about. So that if there's anybody that can help Wolf go down that road, keep this thing going, he's the guy.
Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt.
Well, man,
Good
I
stuff.
appreciate I appreciate all your contributions to the world. I mean, really, Guitar World has been such an amazing piece of journalism for so long, and I, like millions of others, have drawn so much inspiration from the pages, the stories, and all the journalism that you did, and all the gear reviews you do. And it's weird because as I get into the space and kind of, you know, I don't want to call it journalism, but it's like you're sharing things, and I'm sharing your story, and I want people to be inspired to go keep playing, just like Eddie
Yeah,
said.
well, I mean, it's great. Like again, we are the last of a certain generation, of that, the guys who inspired us. So we continue to keep their stories, alive
Right.
and for a newer generation, and so we want to keep this going, And look, and my job has changed, So lately, you know, as much as I still do, I still do the gear stuff, but my job has evolved in this fact that I've been interviewing. I've been doing a lot more interviews lately,
Good.
and like yourself, and I'm like, so I've been doing. I've done a bunch of really great interviews with a bunch of artists. I did like Johnny Resnick of the Goo Goo Dolls, um, Steve Stevens, Frank
Mhm.
Hannon from Tesla. It's all online on our Guitar World YouTube channel.
Okay.
I had an amazing interview with Jorma Kaukonen. Jorma Kaukonen. I even told him I could get his name wrong. Um, and just to talk to him about, things about like him playing Woodstock, you know, I get to learn what these players,
Right.
how they evolved, and they share these kind of stories like we were talking about. So I get to learn what the kind of the hurdles that they went through just learning how to play guitar, the gear that was available, the mindset of the time. So it's really it's really taking you back to what these guys what made these guys so great. And so I'm you know really blessed in the fact that my job is heading that direction. Because stay tuned, I've got a whole bunch of new interviews I'll be doing with some really great guitar players
Cool.
coming up in the next month or so. And I'm going to be doing the same thing, just really enlightening you and into a new audience of how these guys do what they do. How they create their magic, if you will.
Well, that's
You know,
that's important. I think Guitar World, is a logical step for you guys to do that kind of thing. I mean, obviously,
Well, the cool thing is, like for me growing up, and we were talking like Guitar World, like before I worked for Guitar World, and I was consuming Guitar World, the magazines. That's how I learned about a lot of the stuff that I end up, now I tell people about. But I would read all that stuff voraciously, and and learn all the I knew all the backstories because I read the magazines. I did all the homework
Sure.
before I even worked for Guitar World. So it was really exciting when I got into it and started learning. I was just like, oh my God. So now I know how this, now I know how the sausage is made. It's like
Right.
it's all that kind of stuff. And now I get to like have these artists do the same thing. And it's what's cool is having some of these artists kind of take them back and when I was learning about them, they're like, oh, you remember that and things like that. It's very, very cool.
Isn't that
And
funny?
like,
It's
and
wild,
like,
right?
yeah, it's wild. And for example, like just a great thing, I'll tell you just a couple anecdotal things. I interviewed Nuno once and Nuno was great. We just did our typical interview back and forth. And then I asked, I remember there was a certain song I remember growing up and hearing Nuno play. And I was just like, it's like, I know how to play it, but like, there's two ways I can play this. I can play it like a cheating way or the really hard way where I'm have to string skip over 3 strings. And so I go at the end of the interview when the cameras are off, I go, hey, Nuno, that song that you did and that one song, the solo in that. I said I kind of like, do you play it this way or do you play it the hard way? And he goes, oh man, I haven't played that song in a really, really long time because I can't remember. So he's sitting there in the studio with me and he is not even plugged into his amp. He's like gets down on his knee and he's like trying to remember it. And he starts playing it, acoustically with his guitar.
Right.
Like this one.
Right. Right. Yeah.
He starts playing it and I'm watching him play it and I'm hearing him articulate it. And I look at him and I go, God damn it, he's playing it the hard way. It's like, just to give you the amount, like just when you think of like, nah, he's not that good. He's going to cheat the way I'm playing it. And I'm like watching like on, and I'm waiting for that. And I'm like, oh no, he's playing it the really hard way and he's killing it. You're like, oh my God. Like that's when you go like, oh, there's a reason why this guy's a motherfucker on guitar. And
Right.
he was great. It's insane. And so those are the kind of stories I take with me because I've met them all. And just on a small little scale, and the other story was when we were talking about the Helix and like modelers.
Yeah.
I just recently I interviewed the guys in Blackstone Cherry, and they were wonderful, wonderful guys, really savvy and smart, and they're huge. Surprisingly, I didn't realize how incredibly popular they were.
Mm-hmm.
But I asked them. I thought midway through the interview, I thought for sure these guys were using tube amps because they were from the South. I thought they were a bunch of good old boys like to turn it up loud. And I'm just like, yes, I'm totally vibing with it because I'm a big Southern rock guy. So anyway, they're like, I go, what are you using? Again, Chris, the singer, he's like, oh, I'm using the Helix. I'm like, come again? Like, what? Because yeah, I used to do it. I've got into it. It's great. I now have a consistent sound. Like, well, how do you use it? And he's just like, and then it goes, well, I programmed all the stuff and like that. He goes, so then you use in-ears? He goes, no, I don't, no way. I go, well, then what do you mean? And he goes, well, I program all the stuff. It's in the Helix. Then I send the sound out to the front of house. But then I have my own feed coming back to actual guitar cabinets. And I think he said he had the Seymour Duncan power thing,
Power station.
where he can basically adjust the tone coming from the stage, because as you know, with the modeler, sometimes depending on the venue, whatever you created in your own space doesn't always translate on different stages.
Absolutely.
You have to kind of tweak. So rather than going into the actual preset and having to adjust, he just basically, he knows what it already sounds like, and the front of house can take care of that. But on stage, you're going to want to adjust to where it sounds good to your ears up there.
Right.
And that's what they do. They run it through these cabinets and they get it to sound, they're using it the same way like a tube amp.
Yeah, that's what George Lynch was trying to do. He was saying that he wanted to get the front of house to sound more like the records.
Exactly.
And then to have kind of his thing on stage, and he hadn't quite got there yet, but I'm sure he will.
Let me tell you, I think if anything, that's the future for a lot of guitar players, or at least a lot of the old school guys like you and me. Not you, but me. I'm still using tube amps up on stage, so it's cool. Like as long as I'm still standing and I can do this, as much as I think the modelers are a wonderful thing,
Yeah.
I still love the sound of a tube amp.
Are you using
Just
ears with it or not? You know, using ears, your wedge. Okay.
I'm totally old school. I mean, sometimes depending on the wedge, but I like the sound of air being pushed. I like finding the part of the stage where I'm like, oh, this is where it sounds good.
Yeah.
All those things, like just finding all those things that what all my heroes did. That's really what
There
I'm
is a
trying.
thing, a spatial thing that you lose with ears because everything is so it's so in your face.
Yeah.
That there's pluses and minuses to ears. Like I always say, if you have a bad ear mix, it's worse than a bad monitor all day.
Yeah.
I mean, a
Sure.
bad wedge is way better than a bad ear mix, and so a good ear mix can be incredible.
That's what I
Yeah,
hear. That's
and
what I
and
hear.
it has to be once you get it repeatable and you get some settings down, then you're good. Like some venues, I'll come in and I'll recall with real drums behind me, uh,
Mm,
but then I'll have ears, and we have our own split, and
yeah.
that I hit and I walk in that room and hit that setting, it works every time,
That's amazing.
and we're all like. Everyone was like, "Wow, man, we can't believe how good it sounds." So once you kind of have that experience with ears,
Mhm.
you can kind of get over the idea
Yeah.
of losing some of the things that you lose, and but it takes some time and some real massaging to get those things right where you feel like you were before.
Yes.
You
Yeah. Yeah.
can, but it's a difficult road to get there.
Again, like anything, you just got to spend some time with it.
Yeah, it
But
is.
I'll,
It's the same thing. Ed was going to ears there at the end. You know, I think he was having trouble with maybe his hearing, and he didn't like it. I think at first he had trouble. Of course, I don't think.
well, again, it's a hard thing when you come from that old school of just knowing how to deal with the way you play on stage, and then
Sure.
going back. It's like learning a new language. It's
Right.
hard. It's very hard
Right.
to
Because
adjust.
then even your hands are involved, and then it's like your touch is even hampered by that.
Right.
If you're distracted in any way, you know how that is. It's like you're
Well,
thinking.
if you're a nuanced guitar player where you need to feel what you're doing,
Yeah.
I listen. I can't speak for that because I haven't used in ears, but I would imagine in ears becomes somewhat problematic. I could be wrong. I don't know.
It depends.
I'm
It,
just putting that out there.
yeah.
But like especially when you're digging in, you're hearing that amp react like a tube amp react.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite like that, and I would
Yeah.
imagine it's the same way.
It's a different animal, and I've done it all ways. You know, I did it with the Friedman box that comes off the back and split that out to the mix and listen to that through ears. I've done it, old school with the cabinets. It's kind of like all of them are kind of really great when they get them great. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Jeff. If you ever make it up my way, and I decide to go the digital route, I'm going to have you sit down with you.
Well, hit me up. I'll help you out any way you need it. And I appreciate
That's
you coming on today, man. It's great. It was a great surprise, and for the viewers to have you for Christmas present this
oh
year,
yeah.
and
My pleasure. My pleasure.
happy holidays. And I'll see you at NAM. I guess you're going to be at NAM.
I'll be in there.
I'll
I will
see you
see you
then.
there.
I'll be
And
there. All
I'll see
right.
anyone else who decides to come up and say hi. I'll be around.
Okay. Thank you,
I'm
man.
really approachable, so it's
I know
good.
you are. I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming on. Yeah, really.
Um,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
anytime.
Okay. We'll see
Thanks
you
again.
there. Okay, buddy. Have a good one.
You too.
All right, buddy. Bye bye.